Hello and welcome. We continue to stay with our coverage where we get you an inside peek about what's happening with India and China at that bilateral that's begun. I'm also joined by my colleague Abhishek. I'm also joined by Andrew Leung and Arth. Arth, I want to come to you first to ask you, giving us a sense of the implications of this bilateral meeting between India and China.
Thank you, Rhythm. As we all know, the key bilateral has begun, the most awaited bilateral. All eyes were on this bilateral, in fact, after significant strides. Remember, political scientists and analysts had believed post-2020 that India-China relations have reached an implacable decline. But now we are seeing making significant strides after disengagement, then an agreement on patrolling alongside the line of actual control. We are definitely entering a new phase. It will be interesting to see what are the details that emerge in this very bilateral. And remember, the Kazan declaration has also been adopted right after very strong opening remarks, right after very strong statements made by all the three leaders, Prime Minister Modi, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. All of them seem to be focusing on the development of artificial intelligence and focusing on climate change. And the big statement that came by Prime Minister Modi was, remember, the theme of this year's BRICS summit is stressing on multilateralism, and Prime Minister Modi stressed on the importance of reforms in the United Nations Security Council and the World Trade Organization, which is also a very, very important factor leading up to this entire BRICS Summit 2024, because the theme itself surrounds on multilateralism, and India and China coming together on important issues is very unprecedented, yet it might be the need of the hour, and it would be interesting to see what the scope of these bilateral talks are going to cover. They are all set to discuss topics ranging from trade, climate change, security, and especially the border consultation mechanism that India and China are going to work on. Back to the studio, Rhythm.
That's right. And Abhishek, I also want to come across to you. You've been telling us since morning the key takeaways of all the details that have been happening right there from Kazan. Give us an overview, Abhishek, of the cruciality, the importance of this India and China bilateral meeting after 5 years.
Yes, good question, Rhythm. You see, so this is the first time the two leaders are meeting after a gap of 5 years. Now, just go back to 2019, the summit in Malappuram in Chennai, in South India, the informal meet. Look at the optics, the two leaders sitting and having, coconut water together. Go back to the Wuhan summit, informal summit, the two leaders walking in a park and having a conversation, watching a cultural performance together. Go back to the pictures of the two leaders in Ahmedabad at the Gandhi Ashram at the Sabarmati riverfront. So much had gone into building up an India-China partnership, and all came undone because of that one misadventure in Galwan in 2020. So I think so far as the Indian delegation is concerned, we would be reading the tea leaves, we would be closely watching the body language, we would be, going through the tone and tenor with a lens and a microscope, in fact, to see what's going on in the mind of the Chinese, particularly Xi Jinping. Remember, when Vajpayee took that bus to Lahore and gave that hug to Nawaz Sharif, there was a military general who planned the Kargil misadventure behind the back of Nawaz Sharif. But who's there in China? It's Xi Jinping. He's the boss of the Central Military Commission of China. He is one who was having all these informal meets with India and building up that partnership. And he's the one who planned the misadventure in Galwan with the Chinese soldiers coming in the numbers, in the kind of numbers which obviously shows meticulous, detailed, long-term planning, because they came in those numbers and they came with planning to stay there. And so obviously, Xi Jinping has some explaining to do about whether we should be trusting the Chinese, and if yes, what has changed. So we would be watching that. Andrew K. Leung, you agree with that? That since